Hello and welcome to the fourth edition of Legislative Digest with the Conservative Solutions Caucus. We have four members with us today to talk about education matters, specific bills that are in motion in the legislative session. So in keeping with the now new tradition of going around the table and introducing yourselves, Representative Jones, people know you, but let's remind them who you are, where you're from, and what committees you serve on, and we'll do the same as we go around the table.
Well, my name's Lou Jones. I'm from north central Montana. My home's in Conrad. I represent Ponderay Glacier and Toole County. I'm on the Appropriations Committee. Have been either Appropriations or Finance for well over a decade, I guess. And I chair the Education subsection of Appropriations and Vice Chair of the committee.
Representative Anderson.
Yes, I'm Fred Anderson from Great Falls, Montana, and I serve on business and labor, education, and agriculture.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, and my name is David Beatty. I come from Hamilton and serve the district of Hamilton and the surrounding area. I'm a first-term legislator, and I serve on the Appropriations Committee and on the Joint Subcommittee for Education as well.
It's extraordinary for a first-termer to be on the House Appropriations Committee, if I'm not mistaken. Does it feel like a privilege?
It is a privilege. I enjoy working through the numbers, but behind every number there's a policy, and so it's a great committee to work on, but it's a lot of work, but I came here to work.
And not
And I'm Wendy McCamey. I represent House District 19, that is all of Cascade County. I live in the county on a farm and ranch. We raise sheep and cattle and kids is what I'm fond of saying. This is my third term. I serve on House State Administration. I'm the chair, the vice chair there, and I also serve on education, and I serve on agriculture.
Well, thank you very much to all of you for being here today. As you know, in the three previous editions of this series, we've been talking about these big ticket kind of controversial issues: Medicaid expansion, infrastructure, the budget itself. And education in this session, as important as it is, hasn't had the same sort of attention in the public eye that it has in past years. So I'm glad we're here to sort of remedy that and talk about what kind of education policy and funding is going forward. And there's a cluster of bills that we're going to address one way or another before we're done. But let's start with House Bill 651 or 351?
351.
351, which has to do with transformational learning, which you'll explain what that is and the significance of this bill, and then we'll continue from there.
I'm happy to tell you that transformational learning really is not what you would consider new. It is innovative, but there are pieces that have been in place for many years, and I'm going to, at this moment, allow one of the architects of some of this to speak first, and that is Representative Jones, because over the years he has put into place several pieces of this puzzle. But transformational learning is individualized learning that is innovative and moves proficiency to proficiency. Instead of requiring seat time, it requires achieving a level of competency, proficiency. It requires flexibility. It requires resilience. Requires a tremendous amount of attention to the individual student, as well as to what is being what the goals are with the actual school. But if you don't mind, I would
Certainly,
like to
yeah.
Ask Lou to chime in here.
For sure.
So if you think about schools, if you think about education as a whole, education is all about providing the students with the tools to be a productive member of society, a productive member of the workforce. And so as schools evolved, they were all about creating students that would grow up and become good workers, right? And go on to be good members of society. If you look at the workforce, then we were producing students to work in IBM, like in neat little containers, neat little cells, little blocks there. You sat at your
All
desk.
those cubicles, yeah.
Little cubicles at IBM, and so they sat in cubicles at IBM. We created people to work in factories like Ford where they welded or did certain things, usually a fairly repetitive task over and over and over again. And if you think about the work environment that we had, that for most of our students, a bell rang, right? A bell rang, and they went to work, and a bell rang, and they stopped, and they did their thing over and over again. So our schools, if you think about it, are very much defined like that, right? They existed. A bell rang. You went to your class for 52 minutes, or whatever the time frame was to meet the accreditation rules. You sat in that class. You spent your time in that class, and as long as you achieved a D-, you were deemed proficient in
You're
that
bringing
class.
it all back to me.
You know, and,
I thought about this
and,
for a while.
you know, we did, in a structure that was designed to meet the demands of that day, we did a good job of creating students. But when you look out there today, and you look at your requirements today, if you ever visit an Amazon or a Google or an Airbnb, visit where their headquarters, there are no neat little lines of cubicles. It's a whole different world with collaboration groups of. I have a friend who always calls it looks like romper room, but I mean it's a much more chaotic cell of people creatively doing different things. If you go to our tractor shops, the biggest tool of my mechanics across the state is their laptop. Yeah. They have to be able to plug in and run the computers. So as our work requirement has changed, we went back and we began to look at what we need to do in our schools. And so schools that are still what I call input accreditation, very much stuck on learning occurs within the bricks and mortar. It occurs within a specific period of time, in a cell, off of a bell, doesn't really fit the job requirement today. So as we started trying to think about transforming learning, this has happened in a lot of places, well, we've got to redefine proficiency. And so what a lot of the work does is we've recognized that if we've empowered local school boards to redefine proficiency such that it's not quite so time and cell related. So for instance, they can declare course equivalency. They can say, all right, you can spend 2 hours in a work training environment and that counts for your shop credit. Or maybe if you're really, really good at math, you can move much quicker. Or if you're not, you can move slower within the class. And so we began meeting students where they are. And we quit, so what became the constant was we wanted proficient students. Students proficient maybe at a B level, a higher level, and time became variable. If it took more time to learn the construction trade, you spent more time on it. If someone could move faster in an area, you let them move faster, slower. Now you still have requirements, base requirements, what they have to achieve. But the teacher went from the person that's kind of the sage on the stage, lecturing to the midpoint of the room, to the guide at the side. Because in a classroom of 20 people, they might be all in a different spot. Some faster, some slower, some on less than 100, some on less than 50. There's a floor of lessons you have to achieve. But we started recognizing that from the remedial to the gifted, we had to meet students where they are. But as we began to look at these models across the nation, in other countries, and here where they worked, it takes effort for schools to transform. When they get there, it works very well for them, but it takes effort. So what Representative McCamey's bill is all about is helping them through that transition.
Right, and so
Yeah.
what they have to do as a school board, this is locally driven, the school board must present a strategic plan. And in presenting the strategic plan, they determine what proficiencies are.
And they present the plan to.
They present the plan to OPI and to the Board of Education, which approves the plan, and there will be a select group. These will be incubators, and so it's not a large group that's going to be able to access this. It's actually a very small group that's going to be able to access this, but that's by design, so that it can be. We have a scarce resource called money,
Yeah.
and we will support these incubators, but they need to have, in order to have it work very, very well, it needs to be that they have enough funding. And so the formula for the funding has been designed to be able to support a limited number of incubators, no greater than 25% of a population of the select school district, for example, and they can apply, first come, first serve, and everyone can apply for the help.
So
but-
are you anticipating a competitive process? Do you think that it's voluntary, and as you've kind of
It is.
alluded, there might be some resistance out there to change of this nature, but you still anticipate a lot of active participation competing for this opportunity, which is limited
I
because
believe
the funding is limited.
Right. I believe that it will be a competitive process, and it will be a friendly competition, so to speak. But it will be they will want to do this, and we'll try to achieve their goals through this particular mechanism of the transformational learning funding, and as they set the priorities through their strategic plan, as they set the design of what they see as the outcome, their vision will be enabled by transformational learning funding.
Yeah, and if I recall correctly, it's a $2.5 million appropriation or something close to
Yes,
that.
2.6.
And the bill, as we sit here, is on its way to the governor. In other words, it's met all the legislative hurdles that it can meet. It's being enrolled, so I assume that means,
Headed to the governor.
yeah, it's going to the governor's desk. And do any of you have a good sense of whether this is something that the governor favors and has no problem with the money part? Or, I mean, I don't want you to speak for the governor, but you must have a good sense of.
That's a dangerous thing to do.
Yeah, especially at this point in the session where everything's
I'm not
kind of.
real superstitious, but I wouldn't want to jinx it.
Well, it does sound to me, correct me if I'm wrong, that this concept is a blend of philosophy, in other words, more individuated learning.
It is.
And pragmatic considerations for the workforce and the evolution of our economy, the shifting toward different ways of making things, different way of thinking about things.
You have to remember that this is key to being able to achieve the CTE, the workforce development. With this component, it provides the flexibility and it provides the opportunities to work in the CTE and workforce development, because CTE and workforce development can't happen in an hour. It's going to happen in a block of time that is going to be very different than an hour's time. It may be a day. It may be time that's spent away from the classroom, the traditional classroom. It's going to redefine and redesign a lot of what education is.
So I hear you saying, and I'm glad you mentioned CTE because that's where we're going next. And not everyone will know what that is, but we're
Right.
about to launch into that dimension of this discussion. But before we do, if there's anything else in particular about the bill you want to include, and then I'm thinking as you're speaking, teachers have to be energetic, enthusiastic participants in this for it to work, I'm presuming.
You're exactly
And
right.
I also presume there's a lot of teachers out there who are really keen on changing the style, getting off the stage, getting on the
We
side.
have found that those teachers feel very much empowered. When they engage in this, they feel empowered. It changes their ability to actually interrelate and work directly with students. And the incubator model has been an effective, it's occurring in North Dakota, it's occurring in Idaho. We've recognized through time that the best way to have a large population take a look and adopt something is create several successful incubators throughout the series. So other schools, other parents, other school boards can look out and say, wow, look what that school's doing.
Mm-hmm.
That this is no more expensive. It's actually cheaper once you get switched to it, but there's a cost to the conversion. And so in many fields, this incubator works outstanding. And so it's a well-designed incubator that we'll end up with, the way it's written, we'll end up with incubators across Montana, various size schools that can become the model for future success. And they're going to learn from each other. They're interlinked. This didn't quite work. This worked better. This worked not as well. You know, we've empowered local control to make those decisions to become a powerful incubator towards an enhanced opportunity for students.
Yeah.
And if I might add something, I spent the last 9 years before I came here as a trustee in the local school district in Hamilton. And the way I would view this as now putting on a trustee's hat, is I would see this as a great opportunity. My guess is that this will take some time to gain momentum. And part of this idea of an incubator is as success is seen in other places, people will be more inclined to want to try something like this out. You know, any organizational change is difficult, and as was pointed out by my colleagues here, the purpose of this funding is to help facilitate the transformation itself. I would be optimistic sitting as a trustee that there's a possibility, a strong possibility, that in the long run, this is a less expensive way for us to deliver K-12 education. I mean, the jury's out on that, but some of the studies we've seen and some of the work that's been done even here in this state would indicate that once you get through that transformation, you're in a position to actually deliver education in a high-quality education in a cost-effective manner.
Yeah. One other feature of the bill that I'm recalling now is there is an accountability. There's lots of accountability built
Yes.
in, but these incubator schools need to submit a report probably at the end of an academic year.
Annually.
Annually to the legislature or to OPI?
To OPI.
OPI,
And
to sort of document whether things are working or not.
exactly, and then they have to requalify, and then this is temporary. This is not, this is a bridge. We're talking 4 years.
It's not a statutory appropriation.
No, you're right, it's temporary.
Yeah. Well, let's move on then to other facets of this package of bills, and you threw in the acronym CTE. Let's start there, and I'm looking around. It doesn't matter which of you want to start with that, but what is CTE and why is it relevant?
Well, I'll take a stab at that. You know, CTE is Career and Technical Education, and let's put that in the context of our educational system here in the state of Montana. You know, as I mentioned earlier, I've spent some time as a trustee, and I'm confident that we deliver high-quality K-12 education in the state of Montana. And prior to coming home 10 years ago, I served in the Army, and I spent half of my 30-year career as a faculty member at West Point, so I know a little bit about higher education, and am also a product of Montana State University. And I think that we can be proud of our college and university system in the state. But we have an enormous gap in the system, and that gap is for students or even other people after you complete your high school education. What should you do then? One of the problems we've had in this country, I think, for at least 30, probably 40 or more years, is that there's been a mantra at the national level that everyone needs to go to college. Yeah. This, I think, is incorrect. And what we've done is we've devalued the notion of people that whose aspirations and skills lie somewhere else. We need people with technical training, and we need to provide them the opportunity to do those things, not just for their own fulfillment, but also to drive our economy. Fact is, a lot of great jobs can be had by people with education that doesn't require 4 years and gives a skill that is directly relevant to jobs in the state of Montana. And so that's why we've all of us have decided and recognized that an emphasis on CTE is important. We must plug the gap within our educational system.
Yeah, well, you know, I've seen data, and I don't study this, but I've seen data that basically concludes that if you have a college education in America, your economic prospects are at this level, and if you don't, they're down here. But at the same time, there's new data emerging from the two-year schools all over the country, but in Montana especially, and in Helena even, that if you go to a career and technical education institution, you're guaranteed, you know, in quotes, a job at a wage that far exceeds what college graduates in the liberal arts can expect to gain. So I may be mistaken about that, but I get these two kind of dueling sets of numbers, and it sounds like you're on the modern side, or, you know, pushing ahead, and the traditional view is, well, you have to go to college.
I think that, and I have not actually studied these statistics, but my suspicion is that the old traditional view is very much a backwards-looking view. It's a view that is based upon a much different economy that we have now than we have now, from what we hear from employers across this state, that they are looking for people that have specific technical skills, and we're not delivering that right now. And the fact of the matter is, as you alluded to, we have many college graduates that are leaving, depending on what they majored in and that sort of thing, with very dim prospects and also a mountain of financial debt.
I was just gonna say, lots of debt, yeah.
In some ways, this notion that's become embedded in our culture that you have to go to college has led to a generation that is saddled with financial debt, and in some cases, a 4-year experience that leads to a credential that isn't necessarily that valuable anymore. Some of those students that should perhaps have been given a different opportunity to, as I said earlier, pursue something that is more in line with their own skills and aspirations.
Well, can any or all of you just briefly address what those areas of technical expertise are? Like, what are the new industries that you've talked about already? What is it that they're demanding? What are the fields, just a few of them, that are different?
Interestingly enough, Mark Cuban, and I assume most everyone knows who Mark Cuban is.
Remind us.
He is. He made his money in software and hardware, but he is a multi-billionaire. Was asked just exactly where he thought education needed to be going, and he said that people need skills, but they also need and it's interesting that you'd mentioned the liberal arts, and he said they still need the liberal arts.
Yeah.
So you need to have the balance there. You can't have it be one or the other. It has to be the liberal arts teach critical thinking. Mm-hmm. He said they need to learn how to think critically, and they need to have a way to assess information and data that is coming into them, because everything that is happening right now is going to be taken over by automation, essentially.
Yeah.
And so you want skills, but you've got to make sure that your skills are going to be something that's going to be able to translate to further education.
Yeah, that would be.
I guess I would
go ahead.
maintain that any good career tech program would include the critical thinking skills and some of the analytical skills that were just mentioned. Back to your question, I think there's really a broad spectrum of career choices that are fed by career tech education. We've looked at a lot of them in the state that deal with building trades, construction, but as Representative Jones mentioned, there's also a vast need for technology skills and skills that are tied more to perhaps a softer employment than building houses or bridges and things like that. And so I think that the spectrum is very broad for career tech education, and it's really focused on specific outcomes that you can measure and that lead to some career choices that are very rewarding.
Yeah.
So what we're allowing to happen is, you have to think about it, is you can't, I cannot define in Conrad what the needs in Hamilton are. And I can't define in Hamilton what the needs in Sydney are. And I can't define in Sydney what the needs in Baker are, and vice versa. But the workforce has a demand. And that workforce has a demand for skilled workers both. So as with the local control that's enabled here, it allows these workforce partnerships to be set up as part of the training. And so if you're in an area where the demand is, they're very much in need of certified welders that can produce certified welders, because that's the need that serves that area. If you're in an area that needs nurses, you could get CNAs, LPNs, you could do the nursing deal. You could do computer skills largely anywhere, right? Because there's an area, computer programming, that's a need. Currently, we have students in Conrad that while in high school are training on the John Deere University system as diesel techs, because there's a huge need for diesel techs, both within John Deere and across. Ford needs automotive techs. Construction, I mean, you can't, the demand, the workforce demand has to drive the opportunity. The school board needs the flexibility and the vision and the ability to engage and provide that opportunity to the students. Because we're not only providing for the demand that is today, we have to provide the skill set, how to go back, how to recertify as the skill changes. If I take a look at the workforce we have across the state in a variety of shops, they've got to constantly be retraining on the computer system in order to maintain certified to work on the newest of equipment. And so the opportunities exist, not in a competition, and I want to be really clear on that. I'm not standing here. My sons went to four-year colleges. I two sons go to Harvard, one went to Brown. I have a daughter that's an honor student. It's not in competition. Kids need to have the right to choose. But sometimes we're giving them funnel vision. All they get to see is the four-year opportunity. We seem to be doing a good job. 12,000 kids graduate from Montana a year. About 7,000 of them seem to pursue the four-year, and 5,000 we lose. We do not know where they go. We do not know what really happens to them. We know if there's a hole in our provision, it's not in four-year. And nor am I saying that 4 years overstated. If kids want to become a lawyer, an engineer, a doctor, we need them too. But we seem not to be providing the opportunities as well as we could for a certain block of students that we seem to be underserving. We're trying to broaden out and help those students achieve success. And you are right, it's a financially rewarding field. At least initially, you will probably, in a lot of the career tech fields, earn more early on than you will with a four-year degree. Now, if you actually look at the data, you'll find that does equal out. Yeah. And the four-year degrees do pay. It sometimes takes them a little longer. They start a little lower. They sometimes end a little higher. But again, as for starting at $20, $25 an hour, growing from a $40,000 to $50,000 a year to a $90,000 or $100,000 in a career tech field, it's absolutely available to those that are willing to engage. Absolutely available.
Well, I don't want to sound like a skeptic on any of this, but it seems like you legislators and educators more broadly have to have a certain degree of prescience, to be able to look far enough ahead so that the career and technical education doesn't actually steer these bright people into a field that will be dominated by automation. I mean, unless they're the ones running the computers that do the automation, the engineers and all that, there might be some dead ends out there. And I'm overstating that, but I think there's a lot of concern in our economy. I know this is getting beyond the scope of these bills, but a lot of concern building about people not being able to work because the jobs are being taken over by machines.
But you're absolutely right. But it is in the wheelhouse of all of these bills together. It is, these bills will facilitate them being able to know and understand where things are going. Instead of being told where to go, they're going to be able to analyze and use their critical thinking skills, their analytical thinking skills, and be able to use their ingenuity. And this is what really fosters, this is the exciting part. This is what really is the transformational part, is that it encourages, not just encourages, but teaches them how to understand where things are going instead of being told where to go. For too often we've told kids to do this and they did it well, and then they waited for us to tell them more.
Think of the traditional school structure. Bell rang, you go to this class, sit in a seat for 52 minutes, this is what you do. Go to the next class, sit in a seat for 52 minutes, this is what you do.
Those bells just keep ringing.
But it's very, very structured.
Yeah.
The student decision process in that is what? Go to the next class, sit in the seat.
I'm
Go to the next class, sit in the seat. You get some choice on on how hard you work while you're sitting in the seat, but as long as you achieve a certain level. The transformational portion she's speaking of is if you fully engage in the other deal, you are an engaged participant. If you are going to engage and work with his workforce grant bill, for instance, you're going to have to go down, work with a construction company. You become part of, you have to be self-responsible. You almost have to have a college student like, well, maybe a junior or senior in college, like ability early. You have to take responsibility for yourself, to make decisions for yourself, to engage and make those very decisions that were you to choose a field that no longer, that was being replaced by an automation, that same decision-making skill you were taught in being able to learn this way allows you to evolve to the very next skill that can't potentially be handled by a machine.
Exactly.
You are only trapped if you're not able to think, if you're stuck in a structured component thinking. As long as you are able to continually move forward, to take control of your destiny, to make these decisions and learn how to make them early, it makes a huge difference.
Well, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but you are members of the Conservative Solutions Caucus, but what you're discussing sounds awfully progressive. Small p, progressive. Forward thinking, forward leaning,
And
and
it is.
more
How do we
individual.
respond to that?
Always say thank you, but it is forward thinking. But then Republicans have always been forward thinking. Do you need more examples? We'll wait for another day.
Yeah. We'll leave it at that. I didn't mean to interject anything partisan or ideological, really. But, we've kind of talked about your bill, and let's talk about the other bills in this cluster of interrelated small pieces that all go together to kind of build this foundation for transformational learning. So I know you both individuals had
Yeah.
bills. Let's start with you, Representative Anderson.
Well, the bill that we're referencing of mine is House Bill 295, and what it really does is creates an opportunity for grants, 20 schools across the state, geographic distribution and also size distribution, so that all areas of the state are represented, and also all sizes of schools, and it allows them to partner with local workforce entities. It could be a contractor, it could be some other workforce unit, but they get together with them, the board and the workforce entities show that they are collaborating, and it allows it's a two-year grant. It's a competitive grant program for 20 schools, and it allows them to develop workforce skills and take education outside of the walls of the school. And the bill also provides in this partnership for the workforce partner to help with the fiscal side of it, either through in-kind donations or actually monetary donations, as well as providing the training component. And how it's structured is very wide open. The local boards sit down and decide what they would like to have for this, if they receive one of the grants, what they would like to have and how they would like to have it structured. And it's overseen by the Office of Public Instruction. And then the results are reported back to the Education Interim Committee in September 2020.
Yeah.
So that you can really sit down and try to quantify the success of the programs or what didn't work as well as it could have, and use that as a springboard for moving down the road and trying to provide partnerships with businesses and workforce opportunities outside of the school, but still coordinated with the local schools.
Yeah, and you mentioned the private sector's role in making contributions to this, and just thinking out loud that's kind of an incentive. It's not just charitable giving to a school project. They have investments to make in these young people. If they expect them to be skilled workers after they're educated, then they've invested in that already.
That's exactly right. And the way it's designed is the money that's appropriated for this program really follows the individual students. And so it doesn't become a general fund item It's specific to the program and to the students involved in the program. And I think it really allows a bridge, if you will, a partnership with private business that hasn't been readily available before. And as I looked at this with the business community, it was really encouraging, the support that was there and the willingness to engage and say, we want to be a part of this. We want to not only provide the work sites, but we're happy to help underwrite the programs. And it was a pretty broad area. It included areas like the architects, as well as the construction, the state chamber, and really a myriad of players in it.
So is that bill, where is it in the, what status does the bill have right now?
Well, I think the bill is about to be heard on the Senate floor. It's out of Senate Education and will be heard on the Senate floor, and then hopefully will be on its way to the governor's desk.
Yeah.
And in every hearing that we've had, there hasn't been any opponents.
Oh,
There have
that's
been-
nice.
Yeah, they've been all proponents, and so, you know, as with anything in a legislative session, one of the potential stumbling blocks is the fiscal side of it. But I think people have looked at it and said this has the potential as really being a game changer, and it's a good investment. It isn't just an expenditure, it's an investment in the future, and really tries to, it kind of ties in with the transformational thing, tries to move some of the education outside the walls of the schools.
Yeah. Speaking of the fiscal side, Representative Beatty, I know I'm aware of just two bills. There's probably a lot of them. One of which was tabled, and it was to establish a commission to study matters, and you can explain more fully. But you have another study bill, and I'm bringing that up because I noticed that, which is typical of study bills. You know, people understand that study resolutions are different. That happens at the end of the session, where the studies that people want to undertake, they're introduced to the session as a resolution. But a bill comes with money, and so if it succeeds, it's going to happen. It's not subject to the polling that decides which studies are actually
Right.
going to be done. But long way of saying, I noticed that if the funding is not included in the appropriation process for your study, and you can explain what that is, then the whole thing dies. So can we just start there, and just as kind of an instructional thing about voidness, when bills don't get the money they want or deserve, the bill doesn't go anywhere.
Right, well, I don't think I can explain it any better than you just did in terms of how bills work. So let me just give you a case in point. The bill that I had introduced early in the session sought to form a kind of a comprehensive commission to look at CTE. That didn't gain traction in House education and was tabled. But at the same time, through my work on Section E of the education section of the Appropriations Committee, we identified a few areas in the CTE realm that merited further analytical study. And it turns out that with the support of the subcommittee and the full Appropriations Committee, we put together a bill to do a study that was more narrowly focused, or so it seems. And it has a relatively small appropriation associated with it, because the way this is going to work is that the work of this particular special study committee will be done in conjunction with one of the standing committees of whom half of the memberships on the study of the committee member or study committee members will serve on.
So there's an efficiency built in
Yeah,
there.
there's some efficiency built into it. It makes those sorts of bills much more palatable and to all of us, I think. So on to the study that survives now. I just this afternoon presented it to the Senate Education Committee, and and it went through the House without any difficulty at all. I'm not anticipating any trouble in the Senate. What this study seeks to do addresses that part of CTE that's delivered after high school. Most of what we've talked about today is CTE in a K-12 environment. And the two particular things that the study bill gets into in the CTE realm is just the funding of our community colleges, of our 3 community colleges. Right now, our current funding formula, we believe, does not sufficiently recognize the value of career and technical education. It's biased towards that portion of the community college mission, which is you have 2 years of college experience that is your pathway to a 4-year college. So we think that the funding formula is probably not correct, and so we're studying that. In connection with that, we're looking in a more general sense of what is the value of CTE in terms of credits awarded and things like this. It seems like these are sort of arcane subjects, but these are the sorts of things that you need to determine if you're going to calibrate your funding correctly to promote these sorts of activities. In conjunction with that, understanding the credit value of CTE, we have a strong working relationship, our joint subcommittee does, with the Commissioner of Higher Education, who is right now involved in a study of the 2-year schools within the system with a CTE focus. So we intend to work closely with the Commissioner of Higher Education so that we can take a look at not only are we funding CTE correctly, but another aspect of that is, do we have the correct governance structure to do that? I would argue that the governance structure, well, let's step back. I think right now our Commissioner of Higher Education has actually been tasked to provide 2 business lines. Put this in business sense. One business line is your traditional 4-year college education when you research and that sort of thing, and the other is CTE. And I would argue that those 2 business lines are different enough that their funding is going to be different, and also the mechanism for governance is going to be different. And I base that somewhat on my own experience and also the experience of folks around that I've met here at the legislature. So we're going to dig into that as well. It's sort of it's not quite as concrete as the proposals that my colleagues are doing here in the K-12 system, but we're trying to understand what's going on and set the conditions so that we can make some real progress. Because the fact is that a good deal of CT has to be delivered after someone graduates, not just to recent graduates, but also as our economy changes, it provides people chances for retraining and things like that. And getting to a question you asked earlier, what areas are we focusing on? What's our crystal ball look like? Yeah. I think it's best for us not to adopt a crystal ball mentality, but rather create a system that's adaptable enough that we can adapt to changes in our economy. And I know in principle that sounds self-evident and really good. In practice, how do you actually create a system? Both, where is CTE, post-secondary CTE delivered? How is it delivered? Physical locations. Yeah. Is it digital? Is it FaceTime? How is that delivered? How is it funded? How is it governed? These are important questions, and I think if we're going to have an effective CT program, comprehensive effective CT program, we need to set up a system that has that adaptability in it.
Well, I think you've given a really concrete example of the significance of study bills, or just studies in and of themselves in the legislative process. I think most of the studies, they take place in the interim. That doesn't happen in a session environment. But I think the public generally isn't aware of how much learning goes on in the legislature to actually research things and understand them before bills emerge, to change the world. So I think you've given us a great example of that. And we have, about 5 remaining minutes, and I know, Representative Jones, you've got a little list there of a bunch of other bills that touch on this. So you're welcome to kind of run through them or just characterize how there is a bunch of interlocked bills, all of which sort of
we did
reach for the same goal, general goal.
We did begin with the end in mind, which was to improve career technical education opportunities in Montana, not discriminate against the 4-year, but to improve opportunities in career tech ed. We have a negotiated agreement at with OCHI for the tuition freeze. It indicates that they will now recruit CTE. They have a single access portal that advertises CTE, their CTE opportunity at the level of their four-year opportunity. They're going to help educate our counselors in our high schools, both within the class and outside, continuing ed credits on ensuring they're providing the students, putting the information in front of the students as to CTE opportunities. So we are at that level. We're studying what I call the value metric of CTE to see if we're rewarding those schools that are providing CTE. We're down at releasing, we had some data sticking points where the colleges could not see clearly those students that might be interested in CTE. Through a series of bills, we've released the data so they can see clearly, so they can offer opportunities to students. We're House Bill 387, the one that's also on its way to the governor now, one I call advanced opportunities. We began to recognize that now that we've provided the schools the opportunities to let the students move around, the cost has changed. The student, if you go out and you pursue a CNA or an A+ certification or any of those certifications, they come with a cost. Well, the cost in high school, those students don't have access to Pell Grants. They don't have access to the dollars to pay the cost. So it's kind of a money follows the student type concept. That to those students that are accessing advanced opportunities that are beyond traditional high school, it authorizes some money to help follow up with that, to defray some of the costs that otherwise stand in the road. We've recognized that internships and apprenticeships, those type deals have a visionary component. You can teach someone how to do construction in a shop with other kids, but they don't, especially those folks, I had a superintendent send me this, he said, to those folks that come from poverty, part of the educational process has to be beyond just a skill. If you teach them the skill set while in an internship, they learn what success look like as well as a skill. Sometimes in the shop, surrounded potentially from their other peers from poverty, all they learn is a skill they never use. Yeah. And so we've learned that there's a vision component, that when you actually engage the workforce, we work the workforce backwards. Now the workforce is now showing up because the chambers of commerces, the contractors, they're a little nervous about becoming such a critical component and linked to education. So we are touching this from multiple fronts, aggressively pursuing it from the grants from K through 16, to be honest. And I believe it will make a difference, but not tomorrow, right? It takes time for things to evolve. As my colleague said, for years, we've almost treated the CT opportunity as something that was taken by a second-class citizen. Yeah. We have to help that vision evolve as well. Society has to recognize that those folks that fix your cars and fix your roofs and build your houses and repair your tractors, those folks that do all those things with all those that we desire and utilize every day, those chefs that cook our meals. All of those are skill sets that we need to help ensure we have plenty of out there, or our way of life changes, no matter what level college degree we happen to have.
Yeah.
Well, and if you look at it, it's kind of a cyclic situation. If you look back into the late 60s, or even a little beyond that, what we're now calling career tech education at that time was called vocational education.
I remember that.
And it really was a more predominant part of education at that point, and part of it was retraining people, GIs who were coming home, and people looking for hands-on employment. And then it went through an evolution where it basically got pushed to the background, if you will. And as the workforces evolved and the need for workers with skills has really increased, it suddenly has become something that is way more important in our economy than it has been for probably 20, 25 years.
And we can use the BPA and FFA opportunities that are already in the K-12 system.
That's Future Farmers of America and
BPA is Business Professionals of America, and there are several other organizations as well that teach skills, and we can utilize these as springboards to even greater opportunities.
Yeah. We've run out of time, but I do want Representative McCamey for you to get the last word And just tell our audience in general, because Representative Jones has already had this opportunity, what is the Conservative Solutions Caucus, and how does it manifest itself in this realm of education policy?
Well, first of all, conservative means that we really we honor the fact that money is a scarce resource. It is scarce, and we are careful about how we treat that resource. We do not, as a conservative Solutions Caucus, first of all, we want to find solutions to problems, solutions to challenges, solutions to what are facing us as perhaps speed bumps or roadblocks. And we want to be very careful. We are conservative. We're careful about how we approach things. We're cautious. We're careful with our money. We're careful with people. We're careful with all of our resources. We value the resources of Montana, and we want to be sure that we utilize those resources to the very best that we can. So it is a commitment that we have to the people of Montana to utilize these resources carefully.
Thank you very much for that explanation, and thank you, all four of you, for being here today. You know, you're here at the end of another hard work day, and time is a scarce resource too, so we appreciate your contribution to this. And I want to go by saying I so admire the tie that Representative Anderson has on today. I covet that tie. So I'm hoping we're getting a good shot of it as we say goodbye to our audience and to this series. Thank you very much for watching. See you again soon.